there's just no free money circulating in the system. That's how it feels to me. Businesses are drawing dividends. People are losing money on the sale of their houses. So for me, it's not a 6-month, 9-month turnaround. You know, it's structural. It's something that is going to take a wee while, and that's why I personally just see this as the new normal, and things will slide for a while.
I agree. So for any of you economists out there calling for rate hikes in the next 6 months, it's not happening.
No, that'll just kill
disagree. It will just kill it.
It'll kill everything. It's the worst thing, in my view, we can do at this time.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to Markets, Mystics and Mayhem, a weekly podcast with Kiwi Bank's economics team alongside the occasional special guest. We'll delve into the data, decipher policy decisions, monitor the markets and analyse the issues impacting the Kiwi economy. Let's get into it.
Kia ora koutou, welcome back to another episode. I've got a pun. You guys ready for my pun? It's an out-of-the-box episode because we have got a special guest with us today. We've got Dan Heyworth, owner and founder of Box Design and Build, and a couple of other things, right? So we're going to be talking a bit about how business has been going. Dan is a Kiwi Bank customer with us, tied to architecture, building. It'll be really great to get some of your insights around what's happening to building costs, how you've managed an environment where the housing market has been too flash. There'll definitely be some ties back into overall property, the state of the property market. But these episodes are usually always great when we've got an external guest on. You get to not hear from me and Jared as much, and you get to hear the on-the-ground anecdotes, which are typically what really drives the data anyways before we tend to see it. So I'm really excited for this episode. It's going to be good fun. First of all, though, because you are covering a couple of things. You've got the architect side, you've got the build, and you're even mentioning pools. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Box Design and Build, what kind of ventures you're on at the moment, a bit about the business, how long you've been going, just really your time to show off and say your piece now.
Thanks, Sabrina. So the Box journey started 17 years ago, so 2008, 2009, and the core premise of Box has always remained the same. It's that mashup between architecture and design, architects and designers working together in that symbiotic relationship rather than it being confrontational, which is often how you see it. My background is in process engineering. So I actually came from a consultancy background in the UK and Europe, and I also had a love for housing and architecture. And I think one of the things that I noticed in the industry was really how dysfunctional it is, and how builders, suppliers, consultants, designers, there's a lot of friction in the process. There's a lot of complexity. And of course I thought I can fix this. You know, it's a real challenge. And I think today we're a long way from fixing it. It is still a challenge. And I think that's why it remains interesting for me. Box was originally, hence the name, it was meant to be a modular company. And the idea behind modularization was an attempt to standardize the way we built things and to make it more predictable and more cost-effective for anyone wanting to build a house. Over the years, that has evolved, really. That experiment or business experiment, I guess, failed really after 5 or 6 years. We found there weren't any substantial benefits in the overall process in terms of time and cost savings. And so now we're still very much a combined design workshop and construction business working together. And we still firmly believe that gives the best results for our clients. But the work we do nowadays is definitely more sort of premium, the premium end of the housing market. The pools business was a really nice surprise venture for us. It happened 3 or 4 years ago. We had been working with Frontier Pools, a pool company, and unfortunately the owner passed away very suddenly. So we found ourselves in a position where we knew the company. They had some great people involved. They had a good pipeline of work. And it just overlapped nicely with what we did, whether it's concrete work, form work. We built a few pools, and pools has been the surprise for me. Coming out of COVID, downturn in the industry, I really thought that custom pools was going to be the first thing that was going to get hit. And as usual, my forecasting skills are way off, and I was proved completely wrong. And it's been fantastic, and that's just been driven through having some great relationships with other builders out there, the strength of our team, and that's been the real sort of highlight for us over the last couple of years.
So on that pool front, it's been good ever since COVID. It hasn't dropped off since?
No, it's increased. The pools business has probably improved this year. It'll be sort of 40% more than what we started with sort of 2 or 3 years ago. It's slowly picked up. And I think that's a reflection in how people are thinking about investing and spending money in their property. I think we've found that the profile of work since COVID has changed for us. In the sort of 2010 to 2020, the majority of our work was new builds, sort of large homes. And now they really have been few and far between over the last couple of years, and we do a lot more renovation, addition, a much higher volume of smaller value work. But again, still people who are interested in design and are, I guess, looking at improving the quality of their homes, providing a fantastic space for their families to thrive, building the pool to make sure that the teenagers stay at home and bring their friends over instead of letting them go wild. So yeah, I think there's been a real shift in how people think about their homes and where they spend their money.
100%. We saw it as well, like during COVID, the value of the home in terms of really making it into a home really went up. I mean, obviously it was at a time of, kind of cheap money, but we did see a lot of investment go into getting that pool. I think we were even saying that pools in New Zealand ran out at one point.
They did, yeah. There was a massive backlog.
Yeah.
But people just put a high value on their homes, right?
Yeah.
You get locked up in a house, you look around, I need to paint that. It would be great if we had a deck over here. The pool would have made lockdown a lot more fun. A lot of that, people came out, did a lot of renovations. The market went crazy. House prices went up 46% in 18 months, but then came crashing back down. So I'm interested because you mentioned resin before we started, and I did a presentation at the Master Painters not that long ago, and the feedback I got from them was, paint manages to sort of find its way around the economy, so things can slow down over here, things pick up over here. And one of the things he mentioned was, they're still selling 15 million litres or whatever it is a year, but most of it is in this higher end. The wealthy are spending, the farmers are spending in particular, like they're painting their sheds and their houses and that sort of stuff. That pool business and your comments there, is that the higher end taking off?
I don't know. There's always going to be that higher end market. There are always those customers who will spend whatever the prevailing economic wins. And so, I think the size of our projects has really changed, whereas before it was consistently within the sort of 1 mil to 3 mil bracket. Now we're getting a lot more that are between sort of 500,000 and 1 mil, but then we get the odd 7 mil. So, it's
right.
that spread is really, really interesting, and again causes us huge problems when we're just trying to forecast. So I think and speaking with a lot of friends in the architectural industry, I think architects have really suffered over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
There are always going to be pockets of people who are doing well, but overall, I think architectural firms, high-end design firms, have really struggled. And that's a function of their business model. I mean, fees are really high, and when you're doing a small renovation or a pool build or whatever it might be, people aren't going to want to spend that much or as much on design. So yeah, it's an interesting one about the paint. I mean, I think about us spreading our labor across the various businesses, and whether it's people being less involved in designing the big house, more involved in interior design, so we have more requests for internal remodeling and kitchen redesign and so on, or if it's pushing some of our, say, apprentice labor from new build into pool building, being able to spread our resources across the business units. It's useful having more than one string to your bow for sure.
Another presentation that I've been giving every year for as long as I can remember has been to modular and prefab conferences. And you keep hearing the same thing pretty much every year, that this is going to transform the industry. And then when I ask developers, it's like, well, it costs too much to transport this over here. And there's all these reasons why they can do it in Australia, but they can't do it here. So, I mean, you said that initial idea of yours didn't work. Why?
So I've been involved in the prefab industry on and off a lot because, like most people, you look at it and you think, this just makes sense, surely.
Yeah.
You can build indoors, you can standardize, you get better quality, it's quicker, you get it designed, it goes up. So it seems like a no-brainer. I've been to places like Sweden, who are leaders in prefabrication, seeing some of the most modern, wonderful prefabrication factories, robotics, and my view on prefabrication has flipped over the years, whereas I thought it would be the solution, and we even had our own off-site manufacturing business here in Auckland. Box was in prefab for about 3 or 4 years, and we shut it down before it ate our arm off. And prefabrication, I think, is one of those things that the promise doesn't meet the reality of what happens on the ground. So for a start, prefabrication is often driven by quite an engineering mindset. So you're actually designing houses to fit what goes on the back of a truck and what works in your factory. And you can get all the processes right, but you're essentially building something. It's not like, people talk about car factories and factories. Why can't it work like that? You're dealing with these huge, massive structures. And it's like anything, unless you're putting through substantial volume and it's the same again and again, and you're using exactly the same supply chain, then it's really difficult to make that work. If council delay the building consent by a month or 2 months for whatever reason, you need to have a really good pipeline. Otherwise, people are sitting on their hands for 6 weeks. And the overheads of running a factory start really taking that toll on your P&L. So making it work financially is a really difficult and stressful thing to do. The other thing is that the product doesn't really work with the dimensions of the site and the planning regulations and the transport infrastructure that we have here in New Zealand. You'll turn up to a design meeting, you look at the site and you'll go, oh, well, our modules are 8x4, but no, we're going to have to change it because it won't get round that bend, or your site is actually dimensioned in such a way and we need a 2 meter setback here, and we've got a maximum height over in this corner, and okay, well, we'll just change it a little bit. And as soon as you start changing the build process or changing the supply chain, or you're custom building everything again, and then you lose the efficiencies of manufacturing and prefabrication.
Right?
It is modular. And I've been involved in a lot of these groups, and I just go, look, it's kind of it's arse about face, really. It's what we should do is find a way that we want to build in New Zealand, a typology, and how we want to build it, and then figure out what is going to be the best construction methodology to build that. So if you want to build a batch up north, or if you want to build a large family home, you're looking at two different construction systems. Each, they have their advantages, disadvantages, obviously, but really the construction method that you choose, whether it's prefab, and then there are hundreds out there, and prefab is one of them, and then there are also different types of prefab. There's panelized and there's modular and 3D, and arguably the pre-nail is a type of prefabrication as well. So it's suiting the amount of prefabrication to that project and what is most feasible and what makes sense for that particular project. It's a really fascinating topic. I went up to a town called Luleå, just up by the Arctic Circle, which is near where this the Swedish prefabrication factory is built. And it's pretty clever. And you go through this beautiful Scandinavian town, and you can spot the prefab buildings a mile away. And you look at the old village, the old town, and you look at the new stuff, and you got to ask yourself, if I was living here, would I fall in love with those buildings enough to want to preserve them and maintain them and have them here, in 50 years' time, 100 years' time? Because what you find is that prefabrication, just by definition, the process lends itself well to this international style, which is a kind of modernist style of architecture. It's very rectilinear. It could be in Sweden. It could be equally in New Zealand or in the UK. It's most office buildings don't reflect the culture or where they're built. They're a reflection of the construction methodology. So it really kind of brought it home that yes, prefabrication it's a good way to get a certain type of building built affordably, but really it doesn't, or certainly these buildings in Sweden didn't lend themselves to the place. You don't create this cohesion. You don't create beautiful spaces that people actually want to live in. And surely that's what architecture is all about. It's not about how clever can I be with the construction process. It's about providing a fundamental service for people, where they can live, grow their families, work, and it does create a sense of place and cohesion. And that's, I think, what another subject that's missing from the whole conversation around how we build.
And I don't think that's mentioned enough. I don't think I didn't understand that. I didn't know. My thoughts as to why it didn't work is, a large New Zealand home builder, said to me, look, we produce 300 homes-ish a year. In order for me to go down the prefab and spend the money on the factory and everything, set everything up, I need to be doing 1,000 a year, and like you say, they all need to be the same. So I instantly thought, well, this is something for like a Kaingaora, get a few, these sorts of people together who are building more affordable homes and potentially setting up their own little suburbs around the place. Like I think of Stonefields, you're perfect. You can just build as many as you like. But to your point about each site being different, and next minute you've got a height over here, and you're effectively doing custom each time. It just doesn't work.
Well, I was part of a group that was trying to raise some money to set up a prefabrication facility here in New Zealand. We went to Kāinga and we said, look, we can make this work.
Yeah.
But we need a pipeline.
Yes.
We need a pipeline that you can guarantee us of X thousand houses a year.
Yes.
And that's always been the stumbling block, because
Yes.
it can't be guaranteed that they can bring this much land online. There are other things like infrastructure that you've got to develop.
Yes.
So there is no way of guaranteeing that, yes, we can supply you with enough land to put your houses on. That's the first thing. I actually think that we're missing a whole trick here, and it dawned on me during a sort of session with some other people involved in modular housing. But we actually have the solution, and we've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's really, really simple. And it's around the notion of pattern books. Now, pattern books have been used to create towns and cities for hundreds of years. You think of Georgian housing in Edinburgh, or Haussmann in Paris, and even here in New Zealand in the 1930s and 40s, we had a state housing project where we had a typology. We had plans that could be built by anyone, replicated, and the beauty of pattern books is they're not necessarily a style diktat. They are a way of building that provides you with certainty when it comes to the look and feel. So what kinds of, towns and cities are you building? The technical side of building, so prescribing various ways that technically the house will go together, the detailing, the structure, the supply chain, what kind of materials that you're allowed to use. There's a whole range there, but you can start sort of curating local supply chains. And then the administrative pathway. So how do you get these things consented really easily and quickly? Today building is fraught. Anyone who builds today, really give them a medal. I mean, it's uncertain, it's risky, it takes an awful amount of time. The way that our consenting process runs is everything that you build is considered a custom a custom home, and goes through that same rigor. Yeah. So there's no kind of standardization, and this is where it kind of links back into prefabrication. You get that what I call a distributed scale. So instead of one developer building 500 houses, you can get 500 clients engaging 500 designers, engaging 500 builders to build 500 houses. And surely that's better for a local economy. And if they use a pattern, then already you're reducing the sort of friction in the process. You know that it's going to be consented very easily. You're not going to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on design and compliance costs, because there's a compliance pathway there. There's a supply chain that is local, and builders have worked with, and they know how to build, not this strange material that's coming over from overseas that you don't know whether it's been tested in New Zealand conditions, and you don't know if it's client, and no one's ever put it up before, so you double the labor cost because you're not exactly sure how it's going to go on, plus the warranty period that you're obliged to give as a builder. So I think, that the investment in something like a prefab factory, if you took a fraction of that and invested it into, pattern books, similar to what we did in the 90s, 30s and 40s. In fact, New South Wales on our doorstep are doing exactly that now. And it looks as though it's having a fantastic impact. They've produced a pattern book for New South Wales. So mum and dad, developer can go in, they can look at these, they can take these pre-consented patterns, they can pull them, push them, stretch them, change the facades, engage a designer to help change them to, to a certain degree, customize them. But it's a much more painless, frictionless, less risky, less expensive way of building houses that is kind of bottom up rather than, okay, well, let's import 40,000 new materials from overseas and let them hit the market in 2 and 3 years' time and see what happens. That's just tinkering around the edges. This is a change to the baseline. It's a systemic change to the way that we think about designing and building. And in my humble opinion, that's the only way we're going to get, we're going to make a change in the affordability and the improvement in how things get built. And finally, just coming back to the prefab thing, once you have your pattern, you go to the market and you say, right, if you're a prefab manufacturer, show us how, whether this makes sense to prefab it. How are you going to do wall panels? Are you going to do pre-nail? Are you going to do volumetric? Then they can really test the business case of prefabrication.
Yeah. With that pipeline.
And with a pipeline, people will invest. Local material suppliers will invest, and surely that's better for everyone.
This pipeline thing is really big issue throughout the economy, really, in general, in terms of infrastructure, housing. You tell us that, well, you can't have if you don't have a pipeline over the next couple of years, and there's no point in taking ahead these actions. We hear it all the time with any kind of investment. And then you've got like the 3-yearly election cycle, so you add in that volatility, really like trying to get away from that. It is a challenge, but I'm glad you've pivoted from, thinking this is the answer, right? I imagine it would have been quite that heart-wrenching to, believe in, this prefabs as a solution and then having to pivot away from that. But you've clearly, found this other path to hopefully help with housing affordability. Moving a little bit away from the prefabs now, because you have pivoted away from it. I'm interested, so you guys are covering mainly just Auckland, is that right?
Yeah, so we cover mainly Auckland. The reason why we're now splitting the company into a design arm and a construction arm is to enable us to sort of service requests from outside of Auckland to do design work without having to do the building work.
Right, nice.
And we're also working with other architects and designers to build their own designs as well. So for us, in uncertain times where our pipeline is looking flakier, it gives us an opportunity to sort of broaden our market.
Well, this is what I was going to ask, because so you've mentioned that you've seen sort of a shift in terms of the work that you're doing. But did you notice, because Auckland has been one of the housing markets that went through one of the bigger downturns alongside Wellington, did you still notice a decrease in pipeline work? Or was it just a shift? And how have you been sort of navigating the fact that, the past 2 years the housing market's been pretty much tracking sideways, there's not a lot of demand there, construction has been coming off. What have you sort of seen in that space?
It's been pretty rubbish, actually, the last couple of years, and we have seen a big drop-off. Whatever the numbers say, we know that the guys on the ground, the suppliers, other builders, other design builders are definitely hurting, even the big group home builders. A lot of them have, are building their own things, investing in their own land and house developments, and that's basically keeping them going. It's pretty bad out there, and I think the general consensus is things are moving sideways, and they're going to move sideways. I mean, the one thing I've noticed is there's just no free money around. We have projects on hold, people saying, yep, we'll get back into it once the dividend comes through. And these are people, across different sectors. And so, there's been a real pause put on a lot of these big projects, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's what you do as a business owner. You're constantly trying to juggle that uncertainty. I think, or I wonder whether this is now almost a new normal for the foreseeable future. I mean, there's a very sort of laissez-faire attitude towards economic management from this government. I think there doesn't seem to be any real stimulus there. relying on the housing market to grow is we've been there before, surely, guys. How much is there left in the tank? So I think, where everyone is going, okay, well, how am I going to have to change my offering? Or, how do we change our value proposition? How do we keep people employed? And, we certainly, we hoped it would pick up this year. It's not. We will probably lose 1 or 2 people this year. Like I said, pools has gone up, construction's gone down, things overall have stayed pretty consistent. We've managed to keep things level over the last couple of years. But, you do look ahead and you go, God, if that big project doesn't come up, we're going to have to ask some hard questions. So, constantly looking for new ways to do things, for new products, for new markets that we can serve, whether it's custom interior design through to kitchen renovations, through to big bespoke houses. Nowadays you need to do a lot of things in order to keep everyone busy.
It's great you're so agile. Yeah, we don't hear that from a lot of business owners, right? That you've obviously been able to work your way through some very difficult times, but it sounds like it's because you're quite agile.
Yeah, I think we are. I think as an entrepreneur, what keeps me awake at night, and it's not AI. It's like, where is the revenue coming from?
Yeah.
And the great thing about being in design and build is you can see the pipeline.
Yeah.
And you've got a bit of you've got a 9-month head start. So you can start worrying about these things earlier.
So when we throw our darts to try and forecast the future, we are really struggling to see when the turn in construction happens. Like, we thought that the cut in interest rates to a stimulatory level would be that accelerant. We're getting very mixed responses from our clients, at least at this point, early days, but still. And what we've got construction bouncing back mostly next year, don't we? Like, we're still expecting quite a long.
Yeah, just because the housing market and a backdrop of weak population growth and just a ton of listings on the market that's just keeping things subdued.
A lot of listings.
We just don't have that demand strength returning into the housing market, and that just means that construction doesn't pick up either. They basically go hand in hand together.
That lag is very painful.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, come on, guys, are we relying on the housing market bouncing back? Well, we are, unfortunately, because it's either the labour market bounces back, and even you're shedding a couple of people, or it is the housing market bouncing back. What else is going to fuel the consumer?
Well, that's what I ask, okay, is there government stimulus? And I think it's quite interesting, to see that there is more government spending that's almost back at COVID levels, even though the government don't say that. That is what is happening. There is a lot of spending, but I don't think they have any choice. And I wonder whether that's going to find its way through into infrastructure and sort of more commercial projects. So on that front, I suspect you might be right. You might see a gradual growth in that area. In terms of housing, I mean, that's reliant on people feeling good about their businesses,
yes,
about their future prospects.
Yes.
And many people just don't have that cash. You're looking at the war in Iran and how CPI data tracks diesel prices, and you're going, oh my God, are we going to have an inflationary crisis on our hands now? Let's not spend anything. Wages, what are wages doing? There's just no free money circulating in the system. That's how it feels to me. Businesses aren't drawing dividends. People are losing money on the sale of their houses. So for me, it's not a 6-month, 9-month turnaround. It's structural. It's something that is going to take a wee while. And that's why I personally just see this as the new normal, and things will slide for a while.
I agree. So for any of you economists out there calling for rate hikes in the next 6 months, it's not happening.
No, they'll
We
just
completely
kill it.
disagree. We'll just kill it.
It'll kill everything. It's the worst thing, in my view, we can do at this time. I mean, we've been down the austerity road. The UK's been down the austerity road. I follow the UK, being from there myself, and really we just seem to be repeating their mistakes. You look at the Australian economy. I've got a son who's over studying there at the moment, and the opportunities for people, for graduates there is a lot better than it is here.
Well,
What's he doing? Oh,
sorry, you go.
What's he doing?
He's studying design and architecture.
Where did you get that from?
It's not. It was much against everything I told him. But then, teenagers, you try giving them advice. But it's good he's found his own design path. But just again, anecdotally, I have another daughter who's 20. She's studying in Sweden, 21.
Oh, wow.
And she, her and my son, they found it easy to get part-time work 4 or 5 years ago. I've got another son who's just still at school at the moment. He's found it very hard to get part-time work here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Compared with them 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching, but, we've talked quite a bit on this podcast about the net outflow of Kiwis. They finish their degrees. We train them up in really good universities, right? And then they go overseas because the opportunities in Australia are there, opportunities in the UK are there, off they go.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you, we've seen this great outflow to places like Australia mainly. I think like 60% of our net departures have gone over there. And I think there's been a big leave of construction workers. Have you noticed that yourself within the business? I imagine since the pipeline's not looking too much of a takeoff happening there, that you're not necessarily hiring at the moment, but have you noticed anything in terms of what you're hearing, even like, are you seeing a big shed of, workers going over to Aussie, or even difficulty finding that kind of labour?
Well, there are a lot of people who are talking about it and they're aware of it. And thank God we have Australia as our safety valve. Otherwise, the unemployment figures would be just horrendous.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
So it's it's definitely more attractive, and it's more attractive for the young ones. It's a terrible state to be in. You want to be giving my kids some hope of being able to grow a career and a lifestyle here in New Zealand. And I think we're losing all these people. And, that's being offset. I know the immigration numbers are still in the positive, but we're getting more immigration into New Zealand, taking those jobs. And you just wonder, where is the vision that's going to lead us out of this? Where's the vision? Where's the investment? Does New Zealand expand its balance sheet and start to invest in the future generation? Because I'm not seeing any news about that at the moment.
Here. Absolutely. I mean, you'll notice the dents in the desk here where Sabrina and I have been banging the table about exactly that, infrastructure and physical things like roads and bridges and whatever, making more suburbs available for affordable land. But then you cannot underinvest in your education and your health and everything else. And we just haven't done it for 30 years.
No.
We've done a poor job for 30 years.
Yep. And now energy independence is one of the big topics now, because we know that's a driver of inflation, and instead we'll just, hike interest rates, So, energy independence, infrastructure, education, housing. I mean, these are meaty topics that there's a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of people willing to do really good stuff in these areas. There's a lot of goodwill there.
What's the answer?
Everything I think we just mentioned.
Yeah.
Energy independence, pattern books, investment in infrastructure.
Yeah.
Another pet hobby horse of mine is the way we design and build our cities. And, you look back at, the Land Transport Act of, was it 19 55, might have that date slightly wrong, but we decided to rip up all our trams and light railways.
Yes.
We had the
same thing in
densest
Sydney.
public infrastructure here for many of the countries in the world, and it's not as if New Zealand doesn't have the money. I saw some fascinating statistics I'd never seen the other day about the net financial position of New Zealand, and it is positive despite what people will have you believe. Our balance sheet is positive, which is a very special. There are only 4 or 5 other countries in the world who have a positive balance sheet. And really, that in itself shows that, okay, well, might be saving it for a rainy day, but surely, the rains are coming.
Well, this has been something that I've been quite passionate about for a very long time. And we don't seem to distinguish between good debt and bad debt for starters. So, bad debt is letting, the budget remain in deficit for the foreseeable future because you're simply spending more than your revenue, right? Yeah. You would be forced out. You would be forced into bankruptcy as a company if that was your long-term trajectory. So measures to increase revenue, decrease costs, I get it. And that seems to be the battleground. But what people don't understand is that you actually got to step out from the OPEX and come into the CAPEX and then look at New Zealand's balance sheet, which, as you've just correctly pointed out, is incredibly strong. 45% net debt, really low. Australia's at 65, US at 115, Japan at 260. There's plenty of headroom even for another earthquake. Funding it with the government's balance sheet is an option to unlock billions of dollars and get guys like you around the table and say, right, here's your what do you call it, patent book?
Patent book, yes.
And here, and let's design the cities. Let's get some affordable housing done, and don't worry about it all being undone in 3 years' time. Like, this is actually made. These decisions are actually made outside.
So, I mean, you're an economist. You'll be able to explain or articulate better than me. But the way I look at it from a business owner is very simple. I can invest in something, and as long as the return on investment is greater than the cost of debt, then that's surely a positive thing. And what's the average cost of New Zealand debt? I think it's between 3 and 4%, I think.
Yeah.
So surely if you're going to invest in something, and it's to your point about good and bad debt, invest in something where you can demonstrate that return is going to be greater than the debt outlay, the cost of debt, then surely it's a no-brainer. I really don't understand this austerity thing and the reticence of investing in New Zealand's future. The economics don't seem that difficult, but I'm not an economist.
I don't think it's the economics. I think it's the politics behind it, and it is just that fear, and it's just that distinction between good and bad debt, as you say. Because good debt, as you say, it'll pay itself off more and above if you've got that return. Which a lot of these things, I think, would pay themselves off quicker than you'd think. But it's just not being able to. It's just looking at debt as one issue. Like, we know, why is the government a bit tentative around it? Well, we've got an aging population that gives them a bit of fear that we're going to leave a lot of debt to the generations coming through that already going to be struggling with having to pay for an aging population. We've got these crises that happen in New Zealand, like the Christchurch earthquakes or like COVID, but we do have that headroom, as you say, and it is that if we could just distinguish between that good and bad debt, I think things would be so much clearer, as you say.
But it's, you get a business owner, right? He just explains it beautifully.
Yeah.
And why we can't do that at the political level, I don't understand. So what you're saying is right on the demographics. So with an aging demographic, our pension liability is just like a 45-degree line, right? And then you think of all the health costs and everything that goes on top of that. It's just this massive line of costs. So what can you do? You can somehow means test it. You can somehow try and fix that, or you can lift the revenue, right? Which is lifting the GDP, lifting the growth of the economy, right? So from my point of view, if the government was to spend more on infrastructure, and it's been well researched that every dollar that they spend, there's a higher multiple on it. You get a lot more than the dollar you spend $1 and you get a lot more back. Your economy becomes harder, faster, stronger, larger tax base in the future. No one explains that. Everyone's petrified of taking on more debt. And even when you ask National, why aren't you doing that? It's like, well, we're the better economic managers. No, you're the austerity ones, right? That's not necessarily better economic management at all. I think we need to have a proper discussion.
Another thing I'd be interested to get your view on is the elephant in the room. Really, people talk a lot about construction prices and the cost of construction. And yes, since mid-'80s, it's kind of outstripped the CPI. So I think, it's about 1.5 times the CPI over that period. But really, the thing we don't talk about is land. Because if you look at the cost of land and the inflation on land over that same period, if it's 6 or 7 times the CPI from the rough calculations. You might know better than me that I've done, which is really problematic. So people say, yes, building costs are too high. Yes, they are too high when you benchmark them internationally against Australia and so on. Yes. And we know why. There are systemic issues. We can change that. But really the thing that everyone is also afraid to talk about is land and the cost of land. And how do we address that to make the cost of buying a house more affordable in New Zealand? And that's another political hot potato that no one really wants to tackle.
And I think, I'm surprised people have this perception that we don't actually have a lot of land in this country. Well, check out a map. Put a map in New Zealand on some countries in Europe and see just how much land we actually have. Now, admittedly, a lot of it's used for very, good farming and horticulture, but it's no excuse. I think, to your point, a better built city, better planned, more infrastructure taking us further. Auckland geographically is a massive city, but not very dense at all. So there's a lot of answers there. Yes, we can get more land available, but we could also intensify the land that we've got.
And we're not short of international examples and places that have done this and done it well. And that's one thing that I've sort of reflected on in my time in New Zealand over the last 25 years is we say we do, but I used to joke that New Zealand was 40 years behind the Europe. Now we've probably caught up a bit. But yeah, there are we should be learning what is Australia doing in terms of pattern books.
Yes.
How has Singapore managed to fund intensification and redevelopment?
And it looks incredible too.
That's right. And how are some of these other countries addressed their infrastructure, public transport systems? How is it that Spain and France and Italy, these basket case countries, can build metro systems or light rail systems 10 times more affordably than we can?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of good stuff out there. We're not starting with a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
There's huge opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really smart things happening. When I was living in Sydney, they just started building on top of train stations. Like genius. The land wasn't really being used. And next minute you put some restaurants, some retail, and a massive apartment complex on top of a train station. And a lot of Asian people were like, yeah. Yep. And a lot of Sydney-siders were like, that makes sense. Like, we can do that. And there's so many examples.
I love the example of Paris. It's one of the densest cities in Europe, yet most of the buildings there are under 5 stories.
Yes.
It's great and it's beautiful.
Yes.
So, it can be done. We should, mixed use development is something that we've done since the ages, and then we had this planning ideology where we had to split commerce and living and, fun and education. And, I think we've got over that now, but really, and it comes back to the whole pattern book thing, we've got to rethink the way we design and build our cities and how we want to live. And there's a real opportunity for us to think, okay, well, what does that mean to us as Kiwis? How can that be a reflection of our culture, the way we want to live? And I think it's exciting just because we're at such a low, in a funny way. There's so much opportunity,
Yeah.
I think it's surely it can only get better.
So I have a question, because there's a lot of opportunity, and we talked about politics a bit, and we also talked about the CPI. Maybe towards the middle of last year, the national government announced approving, 40,000 new building materials that are approved overseas already, but weren't previously approved in New Zealand. Have you had much of that have an impact on sort of the materials you guys are using, or in terms of the costs side of things? Has there been anything from that, or is it more just this headline number that you hear that hasn't really done anything?
Well, it's funny, you sent the question through and I leaned over to Tony, who runs our design team, and my co-founder, Nat, who runs the building team. And I said, so guys, 40,000 new building products, how's that going to make an impact? And both they were just like, oh, God. And you could just see the pain in their faces. And it's like, you see it from the designer's point of view, and Tony goes, oh, God, there's enough variety there. And why am I going to specify something that I've never used before and I don't know? And, we get all these materials through our office every day, and we look at some and we go, oh, my God. And builders as well, they're extremely pragmatic, and they're not going to put something up unless they have some confidence in it. It's not something that will affect the market overnight. This will take years to go through. And it's like, we're using materials that we're bringing offshore, importing them, foreign companies, profits go back offshore. It's like, it's tinkering around the edges, It's like builders essentially bear the liability of everything that they do, We've got a 10-year implied warranty under the Building Act to warranty how we build a building. And that's quite often the source of friction between designers and builders. The designer wants it done one way, but the builder goes, hang on, it's my LBP that's going to sit there for the next 10 years. They are very risk averse. So I think if you tell a builder that, they'll just go, I'm just going to do what I feel comfortable with and what I know works and what I know performs in New Zealand and the New Zealand building environment. For designers, it's yet another thing. There is so much complexity to navigate during that design process and the consenting process. To have to entertain a whole bunch of new products. I think it's something that we haven't spoken about where it does maybe make an impact is for those larger developments, for those larger developers. But my understanding is they already have, they're like their own pattern books, right? They already have their designs. They have their own supply chains.
Right.
It's that one developer using one architect to build 500 units instead of the 500 to build 500. And in a way, they've got their own little microsystem. And so they've already, they've got their supply chain in place. That might actually add, and most of them are international, and that might add a little bit more variety to what they do. It might shave some costs off. I mean, these guys are building, and I think of, people like Simplicity Living or they're building at a phenomenal cost per square meter, and it's a great example of what we should be able to do, but at a sort of distributed scale rather than rely on big developers who are going to, I guess, build this monoculture of construction in New Zealand. So I think that's maybe where you'll see more impact. These supply chains open up to them. They can show pipeline, all those good things we've spoken about. They can get really good pricing. They can drop the cost per square meter. But the thing is, how do you do that locally, and how do you stimulate those local economies, those local manufacturers? Bringing more products from overseas. Again, I'm just a dumb business owner, but it like Tony and Nat in the office, our heads just explode sometimes.
So last question. We've been going damn near an hour.
This has been great.
It's been great. It's been really good. I want to ask it.
Okay, go.
AI.
Yes.
He said he's not worried about it.
Have you got another?
I know. I want to know why.
Have you got another hour?
Yes.
So AI, where's it going? I mean, I think like most people, I feel like I'm scrambling to hang on, and it is just compounding what we can do with it. I mean, there was a great example the other day. A couple of our just people in the office were having a good old bitch and moan, as we do when letters come back from council. So I said, hey, why don't we just spin up our own agent? Let's put 15 to 20 of the last council letters we've received, train it on those. Let's point it at the building code. And so, Matt, next time we lodge a building consent, let's put that building consent into the agent, get it to analyse it against the clauses of the building code, and tell us where it thinks we're short and propose how we should fix that. So we did that. We did that with a building consent pack, put it in the machine, went away, had lunch, came back, and it was one of those wow moments.
Really?
And I looked at the output and I went, oh my God, do council know about this? The amount of time that they could save asking us questions which are answered there on the plans. The plans and the documentation is so enormous that, of course they make mistakes. Of course they ask us for things that are there. They can't possibly analyse it. But, this took us half an hour to put this agent together. And the amount of time it's now going to save in terms of RFIs, the time for consent process, it's just enormous. I mean, that's a productivity gain. So when I look at AI, I generally look at, in our business, I look at it through the lens of where can it help me with productivity and efficiency? That's the easy one. The next one is how can I use AI to leverage our IP? So I thought, okay, crap, AI's going to do everything. Where is the IP in our business? I know what it is. It's 15 to 20 years of costing data. Surely we know how much things cost to build. Why don't I just throw in a spreadsheet? So now what we do for our clients is when they come in and they go and look, I want to build this batch up north, and how much is it going to cost? Well, I can go, okay, what do you want? 2-bedroom, view of the sea, car parking, room for the jet ski underneath, okay, 1.5 bathrooms, hot tub, wastewater system, water tanks, and so on. And it'll go through all our costing data, and it'll come back and go, well, you've told us you've got $1 million. It's more likely to be 1.3. But then what it does, which adds real value for us, it will look at it and go, well, I've made these assumptions about finishings and floor area, and let's stress test the budget. If we move the floor area from 150 square meters down to 120 square meters, then yeah, you're in with a chance. And if we stick to a simple, rectangular type shape, then that's going to reduce complexity, and we might get there. And to be able to do that now and give the client that report is phenomenal. And
you haven't done anything. The AI's done most of that.
The AI has done most of that using our back costing information.
Yes.
And it kind of depersonalizes it as well for the clients. It's not, oh, that's Dan trying to sell me. It's like, look, this is based on our knowledge. And of course, we take that and then we use our knowledge to sort of edit it and curate it and, take out any kind of mishaps and give that. So that's a real good example of how we can sort of leverage our existing skills using AI to win more work. So that's the second one. Then the third one is like, how can we use AI? And this is the thing I think people miss is, yes, it's going to replace everyone's jobs, but how is it going to create new industries and new products?
Yeah.
So very briefly, we came up with this tool that takes all the construction data and design data. At the end of the project, it makes sense of it, organizes it, pulls out maintenance requirements, warranty requirements. It becomes a live logbook for the house that then the owner can access, the plumber, the electrician can access, the person who buys it, the house next can access, and, it's their posterity. And that's a product that, people can buy for an extra couple of $100. And that, instead of the ring binder, that becomes their sort of modern AI-powered, constantly updatable logbook. So, that's an example of how AI can create a new product. So that's quite exciting.
They're quite valuable too, particularly as you're buying and selling.
Well, we're getting a lot of interest from body corp managers, for instance,
right, yes,
as well, which is another. Anyone who's got some manager property, as well as an individual who's purchasing a house or wants to maintain a house or sell a house, having a repository for all that information in one place, I think is of value, and it's something that stays with the building all the way through its lifetime. And so AI can help us with that. Someone told me the other day, they said, it's just like the advent of the printing press. What happened there is it reduced the cost of producing a book down to relatively zero. So all of a sudden you could spread knowledge. And at the time, it was obviously, there was a lot of knowledge about religion and so on. That changed religion forever. But yeah, you could suddenly distribute all this knowledge really cheaply or cost effectively. And I think that's what we see with AI now is there is a lot of knowledge. Anyone can be an expert on pattern books or New Zealand's balance sheet, and it can open up all these new opportunities and make things happen faster. It's kind of a bit of fear, uncertainty to see where it goes, a bit of excitement because there are obviously there's a lot of potential there for current businesses. I wouldn't like to be one of my kids at the moment looking at this going, oh my God, is my university education going to be worth anything? There are all these unanswered questions that are daunting and I think exciting at the same time. So I think I'd rather be on the train.
Yes,
you have to be. I think.
Good way of putting it. Right.
Just get involved in it. Just because I think it changes your mindset. You start looking at everything and going, oh my God, I could actually, like the building consent issue. Oh, maybe we could get AI to help us with this and reduce that. And it just takes a couple of these aha moments, and I feel you just look at everything and you think, well, I'm not going to take what Willis says about it. I'm just going to do my own research and, figure out, what our net debt situation really is rather than our gross debt situation, So, I think it's exciting in those, in some of those ways.
Absolutely.
I think saying exciting and daunting is probably sums up everyone's feel on it, I'd say.
Yeah.
But we have gone probably about, I don't know my glasses, over an hour.
Yeah.
This has been phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Really, some insights that we'd never even heard before. I think that whole talk around, prefabricated homes and modular homes and the challenges there. Like we had heard challenges, but not the ones that you
not explained that way.
Not explained that way, and that is huge. And then hearing you, obviously there's been challenges over the past couple of years with high interest rates killing the housing market. Maybe that's a bit too aggressive language, but but you've been really agile and being able to navigate that. It's really great to hear. It's kind of what we hope Kiwi businesses to do during these tough times, because tough times do come. We want to say that we are hopeful that these lower interest rates do breathe some life back into the industry, but as you say, it is still tough out there. The household consumer still really needs to recover, and there's a lot weighing on the household. Just thinking of the costs that we're about to see coming through at prices at the pump, when we were already dealing with this cost of living crisis that we keep telling everyone and hoping that is actually going to end, and then we just get hit by another thing. So I think talking to you today, something that will be a real takeaway for me and Jared, is the fact that actually, look, there's some positive data out there right now starting to show, but on the ground, there's still a lot of weakness. We're still really early into that recovery that we're in. Rate hikes for us, it's just like, don't even talk about them. Like, we're still recovering over here.
Yeah.
And I think your anecdotes really speak to that. But looking to see where you guys kind of go next in terms of how you navigate everything. This AI thing, you're going to have to keep us updated. Really excited to see. We might have to get you back on in sort of a year's time and see how things are going again.
Everything will have changed.
Everything will have changed.
Hopefully for the better. Yeah.
But it's been so great to have you on. I really enjoyed it. I think we could have kept going for another hour even.
We didn't talk about AI and people either, and but that's
it's another
right.
Another rabbit hole.
There's another episode that we can get you back on. So that's been really great though. If you enjoyed that episode, please give us a like, a follow, subscribe. Do you have any pages that people can go and follow?
Yeah, well, just have a look at what we're doing at box.co.nz.
We'll put that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's been great having you on. Thanks so much, guys. We'll catch you next time. See you then.
You've been tuned into This is Kiwi Economics, Markets, Mystics and Mayhem. We'll be back next week for more analysis and insights.
Any views or information shared in this podcast, while given in good faith, aren't necessarily the views of Kiwi Bank.